Adam moved through the deserted, echoing corridors of the glass and steel skyscraper in downtown Chicago, Illinois, like a silent ghost drifting through an abandoned monument of human ambition. His entire existence had gradually shrunk down to the monotonous, rhythmic hum of the heavy floor-polishing machine, the sharp, stinging scent of chlorine bleach, and the distorted, tired reflection of his own face in the mirror-like surfaces of the executive suites. Every single night, as the final corporate employees hurried out of the towering structure to catch their trains, and the vast metropolis outside ignited into a mesmerizing sea of thousands of glittering lights, he began his lonely, exhaustive vigil. This menial job as a night janitor was not merely a means of survival for him, it was a self-imposed penance, an anonymous, dark sanctuary where he could hide away from the brilliant, high-profile life he had once passionately led. It was a life that had been filled with legendary architectural blueprints, prestigious national awards, widespread professional acclaim, and a profound, aching internal void that he simply did not possess the wisdom to comprehend or name back then. Now, that immense emptiness had a definitive name, and it manifested every day as the absolute silence echoing within his sparse apartment. The devastating absence of joyful laughter, the vanished warmth of his wife's gentle hand, and the phantom patter of his young son's tiny feet running down the hallway. All of those priceless treasures had been ruthlessly torn away from him in one single, catastrophic fraction of a second on a rainy autumn evening. He could still vividly hear the terrifying screech of heavy tires on the slick, wet asphalt, and see the blinding, deceptive flash of oncoming headlights, after which there was nothing left but an all-consuming, eternal darkness that swallowed his soul whole. He had chosen to bury his true identity beneath a completely different name, intentionally seeking out the most simple, invisible labor possible, a quiet place where absolutely no one would ever care to ask him complicated questions about his past. His former close friends and elite professional associates all genuinely believed that he had completely vanished off the face of the earth, perhaps escaping to some distant foreign country because he was utterly incapable of bearing the crushing weight of his immense, suffocating grief. They had absolutely no idea that he had chosen to enter himself alive within the very heart of the bustling city, trading his luxurious multi-million-dollar penthouse for a cramped, drafty studio apartment, and replacing his custom-tailored designer suits with a plain, faded gray work uniform. The staggering millions of dollars from the sudden sale of his renowned architecture firm and his family home still sat completely untouched in a heavily insulated bank account, serving as a cruel, mocking monument to his former earthly power and influence. He did not want a single penny of that blood money. He desperately desired nothing more than the sweet, numbing oblivion that came exclusively from sheer, bone-deep physical exhaustion at the end of a long night. Yet, even within this bleak, monochrome world of dust and industrial soap, there existed one singular, brilliant spark of vibrant color that kept his lingering humanity from completely freezing over. That beautiful spark was Emily, another night shift cleaner who worked on the lower levels of the tower, and her precious 6-year-old daughter Zoe, who often accompanied her mother during the late-night hours. Emily was an incredibly quiet, remarkably hard-working woman, whose youthful face was a constant, exhausting battleground between overwhelming physical fatigue and a fierce, unyielding maternal determination. Adam frequently observed her from a respectful distance in the cramped, dimly lit employee break room during their short scheduled recesses, watching her anxiously flip through complex medical brochures or speak in a hushed, trembling voice filled with desperate panic into her fraying mobile phone. Her beautiful little girl, Zoe, was forced to come to the corporate tower on those late nights because Emily simply had no trustworthy family members or affordable childcare options left in the expensive city to look after her. She was an incredibly delicate, frail little girl, with enormous, profoundly serious eyes and a complexion that appeared as strikingly pale and translucent as a sheet of fine parchment paper. Most nights, Zoe would sit quietly in the furthest corner of the break room with a large drawing pad and a scattered set of brightly colored crayons, passionately creating magnificent, fantastic kingdoms that were infinitely more vibrant and joyful than the harsh reality she was forced to inhabit. Adam had never once spoken a single word to either of them since he had started his employment at the skyscraper, preferring to observe their lives from the safe, numb distance of his own emotional paralysis. He saw in the sweet, innocent face of Zoe a heartbreaking, painful echo of his own lost child, and in Emily's fierce, protective devotion, he recognized a devastating reminder of the beautiful family structure he had failed to protect from the cruel whims of fate. Their quiet, regular presence in the building was simultaneously an exquisite torment to his wounded heart, and the only true anchoring point in his otherwise aimless, drifting existence. Sometimes, when he was absolutely certain that nobody else in the building was watching, he would secretly leave a small chocolate bar or a crisp, sweet apple on the corner of the table right next to Zoe's drawings. He never once lingered around to receive their heartfelt gratitude or see the smiles on their faces. He would simply vanish back into the cold, labyrinthine corridors of the massive office complex. Hovering like a dark, suffocating storm cloud over their small, fragile world of late-night labor was Marcus, the tyrannical night shift manager, who oversaw the entire cleaning crew with an iron fist. He was a deeply bitter, arrogant man, with small, shifting, cunning eyes, and a perpetual, ugly grimace of profound dissatisfaction stamped across his heavy face. Marcus clearly derived a sick, perverted sense of personal satisfaction from the absolute authority he wielded over the handful of vulnerable, desperate individuals sitting at the very bottom of the corporate social ladder. He absolutely loved conducting meticulous white-glove cleanliness inspections, executing cruel, public humiliations for a supposedly imperfectly mopped floor, and issuing constant, aggressive threats of cutting meager bonuses for the slightest imaginable infractions. His chosen victim for his most venomous outbursts was almost always Emily, because he possessed a cruel, calculating instinct that told him she was a completely isolated single mother, trapped in a desperate financial situation. He exploited her vulnerability completely without mercy, regularly forcing her to stay late after her shift concluded, without any additional monetary compensation, or deliberately assigning her the heaviest, most physically demanding tasks in the entire building. One rainy Tuesday evening, Adam happened to be walking past the secluded employee break room when he suddenly witnessed a deeply disturbing scene that shook his dormant soul to its absolute core. He slowed his pace as he approached the partially open doorway, instinctively stepping back into the deep shadows of the hallway to listen to the harsh, raised voice of Marcus echoing off the concrete walls. "I do not care one single bit about your sick daughter," Marcus hissed, his voice dripping with a poisonous, cold contempt that made Adam's blood run cold. "You are paid to be here precisely on time, and this happens to be your third unexcused lateness in this calendar month alone. Do you honestly believe that we are running some sort of high-end charitable organization for down-on-their-luck mothers here? If you fail to show up exactly on the dot, just one more time, you are permanently fired on the spot. Do you understand me? And I will personally make it my absolute mission to ensure that you never find another cleaning job anywhere within the limits of this entire city." Adam heard a soft, heartbreaking sob escape from Emily's throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair that seemed to reverberate through the empty building. "Please, Mr. Marcus, I am begging you for some mercy," Emily pleaded, her voice cracking as she tried desperately to hold back an avalanche of tears. "I was at the hospital with Zoe for hours today because her breathing became incredibly shallow, and we had to wait for a specialist to examine her. She is truly, terribly sick, and I have absolutely no one else to help me handle these medical emergencies. Everyone in this world has their own pathetic little problems to deal with. Marcus replied with a cruel, dismissive laugh as he stepped closer to her. "Now get your mop and get back to work immediately, before I decide to dock your pay for wasting my valuable time with this useless conversation." The heavy door swung open with a loud, violent crash, and Marcus stormed out into the hallway, nearly colliding directly with Adam, who was standing frozen in the shadows. Marcus stopped for a brief moment, measuring the quiet janitor from head to toe with a suspicious, arrogant glare. "What are you doing standing around here and listening to things that do not concern you?" Marcus snapped aggressively. "You have your own assigned floors to clean tonight, so move your feet before I find a reason to write you up as well." Adam did not utter a single word in response. He simply turned around and walked away toward his designated area. But deep inside his chest, something that had been frozen solid for years suddenly shattered. The profound, icy numbness that had successfully encased his grieving heart since the day of the car accident began to rapidly melt under the intense heat of a blinding, righteous anger. That evening, as he watched Emily wash the executive restrooms with her head bowed low in shame, and little Zoe coughed softly in her dark corner, Adam felt something more than just his own personal torment. He felt her agonizing pain completely, and he knew with absolute certainty that he could no longer stand idly by as a silent, cowardly spectator to such profound cruelty. The very next evening, Adam deliberately approached Emily when she was working entirely alone in a quiet, empty conference room on the 24th floor. His heart was beating at an unnaturally rapid, erratic pace against his ribs, and the words he desperately wanted to say seemed to catch heavily in his throat, unfamiliar after years of self-imposed silence. "I happened to overhear your conversation with the manager yesterday evening," he began softly and tentatively, his voice carrying a gentle warmth she had never heard before. "If you are in desperate need of monetary assistance for your daughter's medical bills, I want to help you." Emily stopped her work immediately and looked up at him with a mixture of profound surprise and intense caution. She had long grown accustomed to his silent, spectral presence around the building, but they had never exchanged anything more than a brief, polite greeting in passing. A heavy shadow of defensiveness appeared in her tired eyes, quickly followed by a faint, fragile glimmer of desperate hope that she could not entirely conceal. "Thank you for your kindness, sir, but the truth is that it requires an incredibly large amount of money," she whispered, her voice trembling as if she were terrified to speak the actual figure aloud. "Zoe requires a highly specialized experimental treatment plan at a medical facility, and without it, the doctors say her condition will continue to deteriorate rapidly." Her voice broke completely, and she had to turn her face away to hide the fresh tears that were beginning to well up in her eyes. Adam did not press her for any further medical details or ask how a simple janitor was supposed to possess such funds. He simply reached into the deep pocket of his work uniform, pulled out his worn wallet, and placed several $100s in cash firmly on the table. It was every single dollar he had drawn from his small checking account for his own weekly expenses. "This is just for the immediate expenses and medicine she needs right now, so please, I insist that you take it without another thought." Emily stared at the neat stack of bills on the table, and then she looked back up at him, her eyes completely overflowing with tears of pure disbelief. "I cannot possibly accept this from you," she sobbed, shaking her head. "Why are you doing this for a complete stranger?" Adam merely shrugged his shoulders gently, utterly unable to articulate the massive storm of complex emotions that was currently raging within his soul. "Because it is simply the right thing to do," he answered quietly, and then he quickly turned and walked out of the room before she could gather the strength to refuse his offering. That small, unexpected gesture of pure human kindness opened a profound, invisible pathway of deep trust and connection between the two isolated souls. Over the course of the following weeks, Adam began regularly leaving plain white envelopes, filled with substantial amounts of cash for Emily, money that he quietly withdrew from the massive, forgotten bank account from his past life. He also began to actively break out of his shell and engage in gentle, sweet conversations with little Zoe during the quiet hours of the night shift. One evening, while the sweet little girl was diligently coloring a large, intricate sketch, Adam sat down directly on the freshly vacuumed floor, right beside her. "What kind of magnificent, beautiful castle is this that you are building here?" he asked softly, pointing his finger at the complex architectural structures she had meticulously drawn on the paper. Zoe looked up at him with her enormous, serious eyes, a small, innocent smile gracing her lips. "This is a special castle for my mommy, so that she never has to cry after work ever again and can live like a beautiful queen forever." A powerful, suffocating knot tightly gripped Adam's throat as he looked at the child's pure heart, and he gently took a bright purple crayon from the box. "What do you say we draw a grand drawbridge right here at the entrance?" he suggested with a soft smile. "Every single great castle in the world absolutely must have a strong drawbridge to protect the people inside." They spent the next hour entirely lost in the joyful act of drawing together on the floor. Adam, who had once been a world-renowned architect responsible for designing towering structures of steel and glass, now felt a surge of pure, childlike joy as he helped create a fairy tale palace with a purple tower and a shimmering golden roof. For the first time in 3 long, agonizing years, a genuine, radiant smile illuminated his face, and Zoe returned it with an affectionate, trusting warmth. In that beautiful, quiet moment, an incredibly strong, fragile bond of love and protection was officially born between them. Adam gradually learned the devastating truth about Zoe's medical condition. She was suffering from an exceedingly rare, aggressive autoimmune disease that was slowly but surely destroying her fragile lung tissue. The one and only true medical hope for her survival was a tremendously expensive, cutting-edge therapy available at a highly specialized pediatric clinic located near Lake Tahoe, California. The total cost of the treatment was an astronomical sum of thousands of dollars, an amount that was far beyond anything Emily could ever hope to earn in several lifetimes of manual labor. Even Adam's regular financial contributions, though incredibly helpful for daily medications, were merely a tiny drop in a vast, terrifying ocean of financial need. He knew he had to do something more impactful, so he decided to organize a quiet, grassroots fundraising campaign among the numerous daytime office workers within the skyscraper. He meticulously prepared a simple, touching flyer, featuring a photograph of a smiling Zoe, alongside a clear, heartbreaking description of her medical battle, and he placed a sealed, clear acrylic donation box in the main corporate cafeteria. The response from the corporate employees was absolutely overwhelming. People who had walked past the night cleaning staff for years without ever acknowledging their existence were now stopping by the box to drop in $20 bills, $50 bills, and handwritten notes of deep encouragement. Adam felt an immense wave of profound gratitude and newfound hope wash over him. Perhaps the world was not nearly as cold and utterly heartless as he had led himself to believe. Unfortunately, this beautiful, heartwarming charitable initiative did not remain unnoticed by the sharp, malicious eyes of Marcus for very long. Late one evening, as Adam entered the deserted cafeteria to begin his regular cleaning routine, he caught Marcus standing directly in front of the clear donation box. The cruel shift manager was holding the heavy box in his hands, shaking it with a mocking, cynical grin as he listened to the loud, metallic clinking of coins and the rustle of paper money inside. "Well, well, look at what we have here. This is quite a lucrative little business venture you two have managed to cook up on company property," Marcus said sneeringly, as he turned his arrogant gaze toward Adam. "Exploiting the foolish pity of working people to line your own pockets. I am completely certain that conducting an unauthorized solicitation like this is highly illegal. These kind people are simply trying to save the life of a desperately sick little girl," Adam replied, forcing his voice to remain completely calm and steady, despite the furious fire building in his chest. "A sick little girl?" Marcus laughed loudly, the sound echoing harshly off the empty cafeteria walls. Or perhaps it is just a clever, pathetic scam, designed by a lazy mother to manipulate people into giving her a bunch of free money. I know exactly what kind of people you folk are, and you are clearly her partner in this little fraud. Do you honestly think that I am stupid enough to let this happen under my watch? Before Adam could even begin to formulate a verbal response, Marcus took a heavy metal tool from his belt, violently pried open the locked top of the donation box, and began stuffing the large handfuls of cash directly into his own deep uniform pockets. I am officially confiscating all of this cash immediately, as material evidence of workplace fraud, Marcus declared with an incredibly smug expression. We will be launching a full internal investigation into this pathetic little scam starting tomorrow morning. Adam felt a sudden, violent rush of pure adrenaline hit his brain, and his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned stark white. He instinctively took a powerful step forward, ready to physically tear the stolen money back from the manager. But at the absolute last possible second, a desperate voice of reason held him back. Initiating a physical altercation would solve absolutely nothing. It would only result in his immediate arrest, his permanent termination, and the total destruction of the one and only lifeline he had successfully extended to Emily and Zoe. "Give that money back right now," Adam said through tightly gritted teeth, his voice shaking with a dangerous, quiet intensity. Marcus merely smiled with an absolute, triumphant malice. "Oh, yeah? And what exactly are you going to do about it if I don't? Are you going to run and complain about me to the upper management? Who do you think they are going to believe? A useless, low-wage night janitor or a trusted manager who has been here for years? Good luck with that, buddy." Marcus patted his bulging pockets with an arrogant smirk. "This money is officially gone, and you and your pathetic little girlfriend better watch your steps very carefully from now on, because I have my eyes on you both." Marcus turned on his heel and walked out of the cafeteria, leaving Adam standing entirely alone in the middle of the room, his entire body trembling with a profound, suffocating sense of powerless rage. It was a devastating, crushing blow. It was not merely about the loss of the physical money, but about the complete humiliation and the ruthless crushing of that tiny, beautiful spark of hope they had worked so hard to ignite. When he later sat down with Emily and gently explained what had occurred, the poor woman completely collapsed under the weight of the news, sinking down onto the hard concrete floor of the break room and weeping with an absolute, heartbroken hopelessness. "This is the absolute end for us," she whispered through her devastating tears. "I will never be able to raise that money on my own, and he is going to completely destroy our lives and throw us out onto the street." Adam slowly knelt down on the floor right beside her, and for the very first time in 3 long years, he allowed himself to make a physical gesture of comfort that he had avoided for so long. He gently placed his hand on her trembling shoulder, feeling how incredibly thin and fragile she truly was. "No, Emily, I promise you that this is not the end," he said with a fierce, absolute determination that surprised even himself. "I am personally going to ensure that he does not win this battle." In the deep, quiet recesses of his mind, a bold, incredibly risky plan began to rapidly take root, a plan that would require him to finally step out of the shadows and directly confront the terrifying demons of his past. He returned to his small apartment later that night, walked over to his sparse closet, and pulled out an old, dusty leather suitcase that had remained completely undisturbed at the very bottom since the day of his family's funeral. Deep inside, buried beneath a thick layer of expensive clothes he had not worn in years, lay a sleek, elegant, high-end smartphone and a matching black leather notebook. He plugged the device into a charger and turned it on. After a few moments, the screen illuminated brightly, and the phone began to vibrate violently as hundreds of unread messages, emails, and missed calls from years ago flooded the network. He completely ignored all of them, opened his private contact list, and allowed his finger to hover over one single, powerful name: John Kingston. John had once been his absolute closest friend, his most trusted confidant, and the single most important client of his former architectural career. Today, John Kingston was the billionaire chief executive officer and absolute founder of a massive, multinational corporate empire, the exact same corporate empire whose brilliant glass and steel Chicago skyscraper Adam was currently cleaning every night. John had been one of the very few people who had tried desperately to reach out to Adam after the tragic accident. But Adam had completely cut off all communication with the outside world. He had absolutely no idea if John still utilized the exact same private phone number, or if he would even care to speak to a man who had abandoned him without a word of explanation. It was a desperate, incredibly wild gamble, a final, fragile straw of hope in a dark world. But as he looked at a small photo of little Zoe he had secretly taken on his phone a few days prior, he knew he had to try. The very next evening, a major confrontation became absolutely inevitable. Marcus summoned both Emily and Adam into his small, cluttered, messy office on the lower level of the building, an arrogant, highly satisfied smile spreading across his face as they walked through the door. "I have some very important news for the both of you," Marcus began, leaning back casually against his desk and crossing his arms over his chest. "I have officially reviewed the situation, and I have made my final executive decision regarding your employment here. You, Emily, are officially terminated from your position, effective immediately for attempting to execute a fraudulent monetary scam on corporate property." Emily's face instantly lost all of its color, turning completely pale. "But that is an absolute lie. I never scammed anyone," she gasped. "Silence!" Marcus barked aggressively, slamming his hand down on the desk. "And as for you," he continued, turning his venomous glare directly toward Adam, "you are receiving a formal, final written warning tonight. If you make just one more wrong move or step out of line, you will be joining your pathetic friend out on the street immediately. Maybe the two of you can go ahead and start your own little fake charity together out there." He laughed in a deeply unpleasant, vulgar manner. Emily immediately began to desperately beg for her job, speaking with a broken voice about her daughter's critical condition, her complete lack of any other financial means to survive, and the fact that this night job was the only thing keeping them alive. Marcus listened to her desperate pleas with a visible, sickening pleasure, clearly savoring every single ounce of her deep despair and enjoying his absolute power over her life. Adam stood silently to the side, watching the horrific scene unfold, and as he did, his racing heart suddenly grew completely cold, transforming into an unyielding block of pure ice. A strange, terrifying sense of absolute calm and clarity suddenly washed over his entire being. He knew with absolute certainty that the moment of hiding was officially over. This entire proceeding is completely unfair, entirely illegal, and absolutely unauthorized, Adam said in a quiet, remarkably steady and powerful voice that cut through the room like a razor blade. Marcus turned around to face him, a mocking, highly amused sneer stretching across his face. "Well, look at that. The quiet janitor has suddenly decided to become the brave protector of the weak," Marcus jeered. "And what exactly do you think you can do about it, huh? You are absolutely nothing in this world, just a pathetic, low-level janitor who sweeps up dirt for a living. What are you going to do? Write a formal complaint to the higher-ups? Go ahead. Pick up the phone and call whoever you want. Call the mayor, call the governor, call the Pope for all I care. I am right here waiting." He threw his arms out wide in a gesture of pure, arrogant mockery. A profound, suffocating silence fell over the small office. Emily looked at Adam with an expression of pure, hopeless despair, while a triumphant, malicious fire danced in Marcus's eyes. A few other night shift workers who had quietly gathered outside the open office door quickly lowered their heads, terrified to even make eye contact with the tyrannical manager. Adam very slowly, with an incredible, deliberate calm, reached deep into the pocket of his faded gray work uniform. However, he did not pull out the cheap, old, cracked mobile phone that he used for his daily life. Instead, he withdrew a sleek, gleaming, incredibly expensive black luxury smartphone. Marcus momentarily knit his brows together in utter confusion, completely caught off guard by the sudden appearance of such a high-end device in the hands of a simple cleaning man. Adam calmly unlocked the bright screen, accessed his private contact list, and without a single moment of hesitation, pressed the name of John Kingston. He lifted the elegant phone to his ear and waited. Marcus burst out into a loud, mocking laugh. "What on earth is this supposed to be?" Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with intense sarcasm. "Are you calling your mommy to come save you? Or maybe you are dialing the actual billionaire chief executive officer of our entire global corporation. Do you happen to have him on your speed dial, janitor?" His voice overflowed with arrogant contempt. In the receiver, the line began to ring. 1 time, 2 times. After the 3rd ring, the call was suddenly answered. "Yes, hello, this is John." A deep, highly authoritative, and powerful masculine voice resonated clearly through the speaker. A voice that every single employee in that massive corporate empire recognized instantly, from major company-wide meetings and official video broadcasts. Adam took a very deep, grounding breath. "Hello, John. It is Adam," he said calmly. "It is Adam Stanford." An absolute, heavy silence fell over the other end of the line for several long moments. Marcus continued to maintain his mocking smile, though his facial expression had suddenly become noticeably tight and strained. He was still absolutely convinced that this was nothing more than a ridiculous, desperate theatrical performance, that the janitor was simply calling a friend who was pretending to be the CEO. Adam, the voice in the receiver, suddenly transformed completely, losing all of its official corporate rigidity and replacing it with a tone of pure, unadulterated disbelief and deep emotion. "Adam, my absolute God, is it truly you? Where on earth have you been all these years? I have spent thousands of dollars hiring people to search for you across the entire country." The mocking smile on Marcus's face instantly froze solid. The voice coming from the high-end phone was completely unmistakable to his ears. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, the voice of John Kingston, the absolute owner and ruler of the global corporate empire, in which their Chicago office building was merely a tiny, insignificant cog. The tyrannical shift manager's face began to rapidly and violently lose all of its color, quickly taking on the stark, ghoulish shade of white chalk. His small, cunning eyes widened to their absolute limits in a wave of sudden, paralyzing panic. "I am right here at the very bottom of your corporate ladder, John," Adam replied with an incredible, icy calm, looking directly into the terrified, shaking eyes of Marcus. "I have been working right here in your Chicago headquarters as a night janitor for the past few years, and I currently have a rather serious problem down here that I am sincerely hoping you can help me resolve immediately." Adam, keeping his fierce, unyielding gaze locked firmly onto Marcus, began to calmly and meticulously recount the entire story from the very beginning. He spoke clearly about Emily's incredible work ethic, about her beautifully brave 6-year-old daughter Zoe who was fighting for her life, about the grassroots fundraising efforts of the daytime staff, and about the manager who had violently broken open the donation box, stolen the cash, and was currently firing a desperate mother to protect his own cruelty. He spoke in a remarkably measured, objective tone, completely devoid of any exaggeration. The raw facts of the situation were more than powerful enough on their own. Throughout the entire call, an absolute, terrifying silence emanated from the phone's speaker. When Adam finally concluded his narrative, John Kingston spoke, his voice now sounding as cold and sharp as surgical steel. "Adam, I want you to put this call on speakerphone immediately." Adam calmly pressed the icon on the bright screen, and the billionaire's voice instantly filled the entire cramped office, sounding incredibly loud, clear, and radiating a pure, terrifying corporate fury. "What is the exact name of this shift manager?" John demanded. Marcus violently flinched, as if a high-voltage electrical current had just passed directly through his body. He stood entirely frozen, as large beads of cold sweat began to profusely break out across his forehead. "His name is Marcus," Adam answered quietly. "Marcus," John Kingston said, and each individual word felt like the heavy strike of a whip echoing in the small room. "Is the disturbing story I have just heard completely true? Did you actually steal money that was explicitly collected for the medical treatment of a critically ill child? And are you currently attempting to terminate her mother's employment?" Marcus opened his mouth wide to speak, but absolutely no sound came out of his throat. He tried desperately to formulate a denial, a lie, or an excuse, but his tongue seemed to be completely paralyzed by pure, unadulterated terror, and he could only manage to emit a few incomprehensible, pathetic stutters. "I see," John Kingston said, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. "Your complete inability to speak is a more than sufficient answer for me. I want you to immediately empty every single one of your pockets onto that desk. Leave all of the stolen money right there, and pack up your personal belongings. As of this exact second, you are permanently terminated from my corporation, and you will never work for any entity associated with me ever again. And I strongly advise you to start praying that this woman does not choose to file formal criminal charges against you for theft and workplace harassment, because I will personally ensure that my top corporate legal teams provide her with the absolute best representation available in this country." Marcus, trembling violently as if he were suffering from a severe fever, began to frantically and desperately dig his shaking hands into his uniform pockets. He pulled out the crumpled dollar bills and the handfuls of coins, letting them scatter messily across the desk. He stared at the money as if the bills were highly venomous snakes, capable of killing him on the spot. "Adam," the CEO's voice suddenly softened completely as he turned his attention back to his old friend. "I want you and that young woman to remain exactly where you are right now. I am leaving my office immediately, and I will be down there in 15 minutes. And please tell that brave mother that her position within this company is absolutely secure, and that my corporation will personally cover 100% of the medical costs for her daughter's specialized treatment. Every single penny will be paid for by us. And consider this a deeply personal favor to me." "Thank you, John," Adam said, a profound, overwhelming sense of true relief washing over his soul for the first time in years. "No, Adam. I am the one who needs to thank you for finally allowing yourself to be found." The call disconnected. An absolute, cemetery-like silence reigned within the small office. Marcus stood completely broken and utterly humiliated over the messy pile of stolen cash on his desk. His former tyranny completely evaporated into nothingness. Emily stared at Adam with a powerful mixture of profound shock, utter disbelief, and an absolute, boundless sense of eternal gratitude. Heavy tears flowed freely down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. The night shift workers gathered outside the doorway began to excitedly whisper among themselves, looking at the quiet janitor with an immense, newfound sense of profound respect and awe. The invisible, silent cleaning man whom they had barely ever noticed or spoken to had just revealed himself to be someone of incredible power and influence. Marcus, without uttering a single word or looking anyone in the eye, frantically grabbed his personal keys and coat from the wall and sprinted out of the office. A moment later, the distant, violent slam of the building's exit doors echoed through the hallway. The tyrant was officially gone forever. Adam walked over to the desk and very carefully gathered every single dollar bill and coin, stacking them neatly, before stepping over to Emily and placing the cash firmly into her hands. "This belongs entirely to Zoe," he said softly and gently. Emily accepted the money, but her wide eyes remained locked onto his face. "Who on earth are you?" she whispered in complete amazement. Adam offered her a gentle, melancholic smile. "I am simply someone who forgot who he was supposed to be for a very long time." Exactly 14 minutes later, the loud screech of high-performance tires echoed outside the skyscraper's main entrance as a sleek, luxurious black sedan came to a sudden halt. John Kingston, a tall, distinguished, silver-haired gentleman dressed in a flawless, custom-tailored designer suit, stormed through the main lobby, completely ignoring the stunned, bowing security guards and rushing straight toward the lower-level break room. He found Adam standing quietly by the large window, looking out at the city lights. For a long moment, the two men stood in absolute silence, looking at one another, two old friends from entirely different worlds, whose deep bond of brotherhood had once been forged in the fires of shared ambition. "You look absolutely terrible," John said finally, but his powerful voice carried no judgment whatsoever, only an immense, profound warmth and deep fraternal worry. "I actually feel significantly better tonight than I have felt in the past 3 years," Adam replied honestly. John stepped forward and placed a heavy, supportive hand firmly onto his friend's shoulder. "Come back to us, Adam. It is time for you to finally come back to the land of the living. Whatever it is you want to do with your life from this moment on, you will always have a place right beside me. We can design and build hospitals, schools, community centers, or whatever your heart desires. Just please, do not hide yourself away in the dark anymore." At that exact moment, Emily quietly stepped into the break room, gently leading little Zoe by her small hand. The sweet little girl immediately recognized Adam, broke away from her mother, and ran across the room to wrap her small arms tightly around his legs. "Thank you so much, Mr. Adam," she said in her sweet, quiet voice. "My mommy told me that you are our special guardian angel sent from heaven." Adam slowly knelt down on the floor, bringing himself to her eye level, and wrapped his arms around the fragile little girl. As he did so, he felt the absolute last remaining remnants of ice around his grieving heart melt away completely. He looked up over Zoe's small shoulder to see Emily offering him a beautiful, tearful smile, and then he looked at his loyal old friend John. For the very first time in an incredibly long, agonizing age, he could actually see a bright, clear future stretching out before him. It was not the grand, wealthy future he had meticulously planned for himself years ago, but it was a future that was profoundly real, brimming with deep human purpose, and filled with a beautiful, radiant warmth. From that monumental night onward, everything in their lives began to move at an incredibly rapid, miraculous pace. That very same evening, John Kingston's top corporate attorneys contacted the prestigious specialized medical center located near Lake Tahoe, California, and Zoe was officially accepted for immediate, priority admission into their cutting-edge treatment program. The massive corporation completely organized and funded a private medical transport flight and secured luxurious, comfortable long-term accommodations for Emily right next to the hospital facility. Adam drove with them all the way to the airport to see them off. As they prepared to board the plane, Emily gently took his hand in her own, her eyes shining brightly. "I honestly do not possess the words to ever properly thank you for saving us, Adam," she said softly. "Just focus entirely on getting healthy and coming back home to us. That is more than enough thanks for me," he replied, gently squeezing her hand in return. The deep, meaningful look that they exchanged in that quiet moment conveyed infinitely more than 1,000 words ever could. It carried the beautiful, silent promise of a brand new chapter that could potentially blossom between them once the storm clouds had fully cleared. Several months later, the bright summer sun reflected brilliantly off the pristine, crystal-clear waters of Lake Tahoe, creating a breathtaking tapestry of millions of sparkling diamonds dancing across the surface. On a lush, vibrant, green, grassy hillside within the peaceful gardens of the Recovery Center, 3 people sat together in absolute serenity. Zoe, whose formerly pale cheeks had now taken on a beautiful, radiant, healthy pink glow, was happily running across the grass, laughing joyfully as she chased a colorful butterfly through the flowers. Her sweet laughter, now remarkably loud, strong, and completely unburdened by any respiratory pain, carried beautifully through the crisp, clean mountain air. The experimental therapy had worked an absolute miracle on her lungs, and the medical specialists were completely optimistic about her full recovery. A short distance away, sitting comfortably on a rustic wooden bench, were Adam and Emily. He was no longer wearing the drab, gray janitor uniform of his hiding years. Instead, he wore a simple, elegant white linen shirt. Emily looked remarkably rested and radiant. The deep lines of constant worry and maternal terror that had once permanently creased her beautiful forehead having completely vanished into history. They sat in absolute silence together, but it was an incredibly comfortable, beautiful silence, filled to the brim with a profound, shared sense of deep peace and mutual understanding. Adam had officially accepted John's generous offer, but he had chosen not to return to the cutthroat world of designing massive corporate skyscrapers for wealthy executives. Instead, he had stepped forward to become the absolute director of a brand new, multi-million-dollar charitable foundation completely funded by Kingston Enterprises, a foundation whose very first major project was the construction of a state-of-the-art, entirely free medical facility and hospice for children in need. He had successfully channeled his immense architectural talent and lifelong passion away from grand monuments of wealth and toward the creation of beautiful, healing spaces that offered comfort, sanctuary, and hope to families fighting for survival. He had also shared the entirety of his dark past with Emily, speaking openly about his former life, his beautiful late wife, his precious lost son, the horrific rainy night car accident, and the immense, suffocating mantle of survivor's guilt that had slowly devoured his soul. He explained how his menial labor as a night janitor had been intended as a lifetime of silent punishment, a way to completely erase himself from a world he felt he no longer deserved to inhabit. Emily had listened to his long, painful confession with an incredible, patient grace, passing absolutely no judgment upon his grief. When he finally finished speaking, she had simply reached out and placed her warm hand gently over his. "You cannot ever change the tragic events of your past, Adam," she said to him in a soft, steady voice, "but you have successfully saved our entire future. You saved my precious daughter's life, and in doing so, you have finally saved yourself." Zoe suddenly ran back over to the bench, holding a beautiful hand-picked bouquet of bright wild flowers, and proudly handed them directly to Adam. "These are a special gift for you, Mr. Adam," she said with a wide, toothy grin. Adam accepted the beautiful flowers, their delicate, sweet fragrance filling his senses like the very breath of a brand new life. He looked down at the smiling child, and then he looked into Emily's warm, loving eyes, and in that precise moment, he finally understood that his long, painful journey of penance had officially come to an end. He had never managed to find the numb, empty oblivion he had so desperately sought out in the dark corridors of the skyscraper. Instead, he had discovered something infinitely more precious and enduring: true forgiveness and a brand new family. It was a family created not by the traditional bonds of biology, but by the conscious choice of deep empathy, mutual survival, and a pure, unyielding love that had been miraculously born in the absolute darkest, most forgotten corner of his existence. Standing on the beautiful shores of the lake, looking out at the magnificent future ahead, he knew he was finally home. This beautiful journey of redemption teaches us a profound, timeless truth about the intricate nature of human existence, a truth that carries a particularly deep resonance for those who have weathered the long, unpredictable storms of a full life. It reminds us, with absolute clarity, that the ultimate value of a human life cannot ever be measured by the staggering size of a corporate bank account, the prestigious titles stamped onto a business card, or the grand physical monuments of glass and steel that we build to honor our own earthly ambitions. True wealth, the kind of wealth that can never be stolen by a cruel manager or lost in a sudden economic downturn, resides exclusively in our willingness to extend a hand of pure, unconditional kindness to another human soul when they are trapped in their deepest moments of vulnerability. We often spend the vibrant years of our youth frantically chasing after illusions of grandeur, believing that security and happiness are things that can be bought, designed, or strictly controlled through sheer force of will. Yet, as the years advance and life inevitably hums a more gentle, reflective tune, we come to realize that the most magnificent structures we can ever possibly design are not made of concrete and marble, but of empathy, compassion, and shared human solidarity. Grief is an incredibly heavy, dark labyrinth that can easily cause a person to bury themselves alive within the cold shadows of isolation, convincing them that their own broken hearts are utterly beyond repair or unworthy of experiencing joy ever again. However, the true healing of our own deep internal wounds can never be achieved by running away into the dark or treating our lives as a perpetual penance for the tragedies we could not prevent. True healing begins the exact moment we choose to look past our own immense pain and recognize the echoing suffering in the eyes of a stranger walking right beside us in the dark. By allowing ourselves to become a beacon of hope for someone else who is drowning in despair, we miraculously uncover the keys to our own liberation from the chains of past regret. Life, in its infinite, mysterious wisdom, will frequently strip away the superficial armor we build around ourselves, forcing us down to the very basement of existence, so that we may finally learn what truly matters. In those quiet, humbling spaces, we discover that a simple act of quiet generosity, a gentle word spoken to a frightened child, or a fierce stand taken against injustice, is worth infinitely more than all the gold in the world. True wealth is found in the soft warmth of a grateful child's hand holding yours, the peaceful radiance of a mother's smile when her fears have been lifted, and the profound knowledge that your presence on this earth has made someone else's journey a little brighter. It is a beautiful reminder that no matter how dark or frozen our hearts may become under the heavy weight of sorrow, the light of love and the power of human connection can always melt the ice, guide us out of the shadows, and finally welcome us back home.